Okay. Hi, I'm Patrick. Today I'm talking about sigil magic, which I guess is a thing that people want to know about. It's very in today's magical occult climate, it's very synonymous with chaos magic, and there are some reasons for that, but it's most of what it is a technique, and it's a pretty simple technique that you can use to get good results. And I have prepared a PowerPoint. So I am trying to keep the chat open, and Emily's going to be keeping an eye on it too. So if anyone has any questions, sometimes I just get going. So pop up in the chat or use the little hand wave thing, or if I miss something, then Emily can clue me on it. Okay. Okay. So let's see how the share screen works. Okay. Okay, I don't know how to do this yet. Hold on.
There should be a button that says share at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
Well, I'm also trying to get the thing to show the slideshow. Oh, there's a thing that says start slideshow. That's not working. From beginning. There we go. Okay. And we'll share that. And that still didn't do what I wanted to do. There we go. Is that coming up? Is everyone seeing that?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Yay, something I did looks good. Hooray. Hopefully there are no misspellings. I cannot see my chat window with this up. So if you can clue me in on it, then I'd appreciate that, because I might miss that. Okay, so we're going to start out with the basics. I don't know who is familiar with sigil magic or with even sigils or what it is. So hopefully if you're interested in it, you've at least heard the term or familiar with it. But basically what it is a image or a glyph that has some kind of information encoded into it that you activate somehow to bring practical real world results. We're doing magic here. That's the goal of most magical operations. We've had sigils around for a very long time. If you look in old like ritual magic, ceremonial magic, your Renaissance grimoires and everything, they've had magic squares and other systems that they've used to develop sigils. Most of your angelic names will have some sort of sigil representation on there. And there are ways that they use those different techniques to develop and generate those. And I'm going to look at some of that too and show you how to use that. And then we have more modern techniques. Most of what people will refer to as sigil magic was kind of pioneered by an artist known as Austin Osman Spare. He wrote a lot of esoteric stuff and some occult stuff, and he incorporated that into his art. And one of the things he did was he developed what he called an alphabet of desire, where he had repeating glyphs or images that he used to represent certain ideas in his work. And he also developed a technique for writing something out and turning it into a visual image that you could use in an altered state of consciousness to project out and cause change. His techniques were really popular with the chaos magicians in the 70s and 80s. So the late 1900s. So a lot of what we talk about as chaos magic are going to rely on his techniques of writing something out and then manipulating it so that you get an image that you can enchant somehow. So most of the work that I'm familiar with as to what needs to go into it is from the chaos magic paradigm or system. And chaos magical theory can get very complex depending on how you look at it. Pete Carroll has this huge elaborate scheme done up with actual mathematical equations and algebra that you use to calculate how intense your state of consciousness is, what the probability of something is, all these different factors that go into it. And it can get very tricky and even confusing. And because he's not exactly the most eloquent author, Phil Hine is a much more accessible author, in my humble opinion. But the gist of it is right here that magic is inhibited by conscious awareness of what you're trying to do. And you also have a subconscious resistance to it because you've been exposed to a lot of paradigms that say magic isn't real, magic can't happen. So those are things that you have to kind of bring down when you do magic. Now, you also have a magical link that you create to your target when you're doing a magical act. And then you have what chaos magicians refer to as gnosis, which is kind of a focus of consciousness. How intensely is your consciousness narrowed in the moment on what you're doing? And that's that shift in consciousness that kind of fires stuff off. So when you're doing sigil magic, basically what you're doing is you're taking a conscious statement of your goal, what you want to have happen, and you're rendering it in a way that still encodes that information that your subconscious can recognize, and you're bypassing the conscious mind and the conscious resistance with that image. You're just kind of sneaking it in there so that the subconscious mind can activate it when you hit that point of gnosis. So it gets very Jungian, I suppose, but the practice is that you put something in a form that it sneaks past all of those conscious sensors that can inhibit magical acts. So we've got a bunch of techniques for making sigils, and I'll go over those. The only thing you really need to do to make a sigil, you only need like a pen and paper. I've even done 3-dimensional ones using silly putty or Play-Doh and other things like that. But you just need to write something out and draw it. You can get as elaborate as you want, but it's really simple when it gets down to it. There are a couple different techniques. The older, more traditional ones that you'll find in ceremonial magic traditions are using magic squares or using the rose cross layman or some other template that is in accordance to a given magical system. So I didn't have any images of rose or of magic squares, but I'm sure you've all seen like the 3x3 or 4x4 images that have the numbers on them according to certain arrangements for planetary scales, or the rose cross arrangement, which I do have some images of that are going to pop up. And what it is that you take your image or your goal, and then you transpose it somehow on that template and get an image out of it. Which one you use depends on what you're doing or what system you're in. The magic squares are interesting because they vary depending on what planetary sphere you're working in. If you're trying to do something with the moon, Dreamwork or something like that, then you'd pull out a lunar magic square, which I think that's like, is that 8x8? I don't know. It's a big one. And then you've got a lot more room to it as opposed to if you have like the sphere of Saturn where you've got like a 3x3. And then you just kind of render it in a way that you can transpose it upon that. And then the design you have left, you can consecrate or charge somehow. They're used a lot for talismanic work, for naming entities, familiars that you create, that kind of thing. So this right here is the rose cross lamen on the left side. This is the full figure. It is in Hebrew because it's Kabbalistic. The part that we're looking on is right here in the center, where that's the rose part, and each of the petals has a different Hebrew letter that corresponds to it. Now, the Hebrew alphabet does have some, or supposedly has correspondences to the Greek alphabet. I've never pursued that fully to understand how legitimate those are, but they've got the same number of letters in their alphabets. So the gematria is said to work depending on who you asked. But on the right, you have that same image with the Latin letters that those Hebrew letters correspond to. So you can either take a word that you're looking for that represents your goal, and you can translate it into Hebrew and use the Hebrew letters, or you can transliterate it using the Latin alphabet to approximate the sounds that it would show on there. So if you're doing like a lot of the angelic names or spirit names would have the straight Hebrew, and those glyphs that you would see in conjurations and grimoires should correspond to this in the way that names are set up. Or if you're doing talismanic work and you want different archangels and you don't remember what it is, you can go up here and you can look for Michael, and can you guys see the mouse? Is that, yeah. So which one's mem? I'm really terrible with my Hebrew. I haven't done it in a while. So this one's a mem, so you'd start there, and that's not a mem, that's a tet. I don't know. But you would trace lines on there depending on what you're wanting to do. And there's an example. These are taken from Don Craig's Modern Magic, and this is one that he did. If you're doing a sigil because you want friendship, you want to bring more friends to you, so this is how you would do it. You would start the open circle is your starting point, and then the little line on it is your ending point. And these both start, there's no F in Hebrew, so you go to that PH sound and then start there, and then he starts the F, R, and then your I, Y, and J are all the same letters in Hebrew, and then you would move through there, and then on the right here is what the final sigil would look like. And if you're wanting to do a spell to bring friendship into your life, you would use that either as a focus, or you'd put it on a talisman or something like that. And this is a similar technique that would be used for a magic square as well. It's just a slightly different system. This is pretty common among ceremonial magicians because of the whole Kabbalah aspect of it. So that is that technique. And hopefully I'm not running through this too quickly. Is any questions or anything so far come up? Nope. Okay.
Nope, nothing yet. You're doing, looks good.
Okay. So then we have the techniques that are more similar to what Spare came up with. I'm calling them letter-based techniques because you start by actually writing it out. You write it out as a statement of intent, which is just your goal or the result that you want to have happen. You can use this to create either an image, the sigil, or you can also use it to make a mantra, or you can do both and pair them together. You can chant the mantra while you're charging the sigil. They can be related, they can be slightly different. You've got a lot of room to play with there. So you figure out what you want, write your statement of intent. I'll go over those a little bit later on how we can kind of formulate something that works. You remove all the duplicate letters from that statement of intent, and then you rearrange the letters, and so that you can squish them together into some sort of abstract image or a phrase that you can use as a mantra. So these images that I brought up, I stole from Liber Chaos by Pete Carroll, who was one of the early chaos magicians that popularized this technique. So pardon the bad image that I got. He made a nonsense statement, I wish to obtain the Necronomicon. If you really want to obtain the Necronomicon, you can go to Barnes and Noble and pick it up. It's like $10. I don't know what the spell work is for, but then again, this was the late 70s, early 80s. Maybe it was harder to get. But you write out the statement of your intent. I wish to obtain the Necronomicon. This is a poor statement of intent, which I'll go into later. You eliminate, as he's done, all of the repeated letters. Some sorcerers will recommend that you also remove all of the vowels. I was never quite sure why, but that was the thing that was suggested. So you have a condensed version that you can kind of see the initial intent in, but not really. And then you just kind of stack the letters together and mush them up in ways that that they're represented somehow. In theory, if you go through that little glyph there on the lower left, you can see all of those letters represented somehow in there. And then you would tweak them or rearrange them so you get a prettier sigil. And the advice really is to just make it look appealing to you, make it look aesthetically pleasing to you, because we're blending that border between this magical work and art. It has to speak to the subconscious. So make it look pretty. How it looks when it looks done or pretty is up to you. It's all subjective. Some people have very angular and, you know, kind of technical looking sigils that they tend to come up with. Other people who are more artistic will have a lot of curves and swoops and everything else. Mine always tend to look kind of like grids in some way, but you just stick them together and that's the image that you're going to use. And that image that's represented there should represent what your statement of intent is. It's encoded in there. And when you see that, your subconscious recognizes that that's what it's saying in theory. So we also have a mantra method where, oh God, I swear it's like, this was long before Reddit was a thing, but this is like, I see this all the time on Reddit. How do you summon a succubus? These little teenage edgelords always want this, but I want to meet a succubus in a dream. So he goes through and removes all the duplicate letters and then rearrange it into something that's pronounceable and use that as a mantra. You don't even need to draw an image. You can repeat this over and over until you attain an altered state of consciousness. You can repeat it just before you go, like in this case, I'd repeat it just before I went to sleep over and over again. And then you've got that running through your head as you go into a dream state. And then, you know, then you'll get your soul sucked out by a succubus. I don't know. But that representation is there, that you now have a sound associated with it. You've got a verbal cue that you can use, and you can pair those together so you can make the image using that statement of intent and then make a mantra from the same thing, and then you have something to chant while you're charging that, and that can kind of improve your methods if engaging both of those methods help you out. So we also have a pictographic method where you just kind of draw little pictures and then draw what you want to have happen and then distort it into some kind of abstract sigil. I really like this. I just love how Carroll shows that he's not really good at drawing people in this. But in this example, if he's trying to restrain an adversary, he's got an image of a person with an initial that represents that person's name, and then it's being restrained, mind, heart. I guess he's going for different chakras there, and then he has distorted that into a sigil that he can then use to enchant or activate, and then that would hopefully have its intended effect upon the target there. So you've already got, just with those three basic methods, real simple. Like I said, you just need a pen and a pad of paper, and you've got something that when these are launched can be very effective, and they're really simple to that's really easy to do on the fly. I've been in situations where I've cast spells at work. I've done wonderful things with that. I've made real quick sigils. I've drawn them on napkins. Oh God, I did a, maybe I shouldn't tell that story. Should I tell the story? Okay, so there is a place that I worked at where there was a guy that was harassing a coworker, and I put him in the cooler, and he kind of calmed down a little bit, and then he got really aggressive then. And so what I did is I made a representation of his name, and then I wrapped it up and I dropped it in a deep fryer. So, but real simple thing. I've made sigils where I've tossed them on I've written them on napkins and tossed them on a saute burner, and poof, up they go. So real simple on the go magic. So any questions so far about creating these kinds of things? Does anyone have anything? Nope.
Anyone have any questions?
Oh, yes. Devin, you had a question?
Go ahead.
I forgot how to turn on the sound. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting an idea of the sigils. Is that I'm trying to attract some money to me, and I've done some other petition spells and things like that, candle magic and everything, but I want to try to do something a little bit more powerful. But once you get your sigil created, would you want to like put it somewhere where you could see it every day, just as like a reminder kind of thing, once you have it created?
Well, I'm actually about to cover how to launch those, so I am going to get into some of that. But chaos magic is very concerned with that issue of conscious awareness of what you're doing. So you can also, lust of results can be a big thing. So if you've got one primary goal that you're looking for and you have it out there, it can bring you back. There are ways that you can use passive charging like that if it's in a place that's out of the corner of your eye or something. But if you've already done something significant to consecrate or charge it, and then you keep it around unless it's something that is a long-term thing that's supposed to last, in theory, that can kind of inhibit it a little bit because it's raising that conscious awareness of it. This isn't the same kind of technique as like an affirmation type thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's you want a very specific instructions, and then launch it at that particular event. And I'll go into what kind of techniques you can use to develop your statement of intent and refine it, and also ways that you can use for longer goals. Large goals you want to break down into smaller chunks and then have them interrelated, and you can actually improve the probability of everything happening by having it in little units that you can make more likely, and then it gets a cascade effect up there.
Oh, so like a series of sigils.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. I got a slide for that. I'm very proud of it. It's something about fish. I don't know what the deal with fish is, but yeah. No, that's a good question. It's something that I'm already going to touch on, so I'm going to go there. Keep on to that question though, and if I don't address it fully the way that you're wanting it answered, let me know, and I can try and go over it if I don't cover it right. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Boom. Okay. So developing a statement of intent. You don't want to have vague, abstract goals. This isn't the kind of thing that you'd want to like, I want to be wealthy. You would want like, what do you mean by wealthy? What do you mean by gaining wealth? Do you really want to be wealthy? Do you want a successful career? Are you going to work for that? You have to very carefully think about what it is that you want. You want to be as clear as possible about your goal. And this is really big on probability. So you want to consider how probable is that goal? Is it to reach that goal? Can I break that goal down into smaller stretch goals that will make the larger one more likely? So the individual sigils that you do, you want to be brief as well. You want to be clear and brief. You want to have short, succinct statements that you can sigilize quickly. And if you need to, you can link those together or follow them up with other sigils to add on to that. Statements like I want or I wish are not good praxis. One of the examples that was on there actually said, I wish to obtain the Necronomicon. That's kind of a poor example, because what has been found by many people who do this kind of work is that when you make a statement like I wish or I want, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the feeling of desire. You're basically casting a spell to make yourself want something more, and instead of casting the spell to make that thing happen. So you want to kind of avoid that language. This is also very tied into with the chaos magic. It's tied into neurolinguistic programming, which I'm not sure who all is familiar with that, but it is very centered on how you use language and how your use of language can affect your thinking, and especially your subconscious thinking and how you put yourself into different types of trance states. So you want to be as direct and practical as possible. Some magicians advise only using positive phrasing and putting all of your stuff in present tense. The subconscious tends not to avoid processes like don't or not very well. So you want to find a way to put that in a more positive light. You wouldn't say, I don't want to be poor. You would say, I want to be financially stable. And what you would really do is narrow that down to, I wish to have opportunities that will increase my financial stability, or I will develop skills that will get me opportunities for get me financial opportunities. There's also something called, I think Phil Hine called it V prime, where you remove all tenses of the verb to be out of it. So you avoid making statements like I am or I will. I haven't seen everybody advocate that. I've had success with it. Other people have had success without doing that. So it's kind of up to you, whatever makes sense to you. But chaos magic is very much about the process of doing. So you don't want to focus on like states of being too much. It can act as kind of a distraction. Time is weird. It can get very tricky, especially since you're using your subconscious to define time. So if you're doing a spell, like a lot of them will recommend doing it as present tense, or even as putting it in terms like it's already happened. Like instead of saying, I want to buy my house by March 29th, you would say, I own my home. And then you'd put the statement that way. I've had mixed results with doing it that way. I don't know that aesthetically it works for me, but for other people, they swear by it. So the real thing is to experiment and figure out what works best for you with the way that you use language and the way that you think about things and how you frame them. I tend to use astrological events if I have to put a time component in there, because it's something that is, external and pretty apparent, but it's not like an abstract idea like 6 o'clock on Wednesday the 3rd. It's when the moon is conjunct the sun in Aries. And that's a definite thing, that when that happens, that everything else should have happened already, or should happen at that time. So moving 10, what I got. And I've already talked about some of this, but having a larger goal broken down into smaller components really does help with the increasing the probability, which is what this type of magic is aimed at. If I say, I want to buy a house, and your goal is to buy a house, well, then you should be doing a series of smaller enchantments to release any old debt, to improve your credit score, to to get a raise at work so you've got more income, to have opportunities come up for a place that is ideal, what you're looking for, those kinds of things, so that you can have those little pieces build up to that larger one. And as if you've got an outstanding debt that you haven't taken care of and you're trying to apply for a home loan, your probability of that happening is going to be pretty low. But if you do spells for avenues to show up to help take care of that, then that's going to increase the chances of everything else working out. If you're doing a spell to find an ideal mate, then you'd want to be sure that you have an environment set up for that kind of person, that you have space in your home, that you've got time to spend with a person that you have interest developed, and you'd want to do enchantments like that upon yourself to make those kinds of things happen or facilitate that, so that it can improve the likelihood of getting what you want brought into your life.
Hey, Sean.
Uh-huh.
We have a question about the time thing. It says, why are we changing the time element again? Maybe explain the time part a bit more.
Basically, it's best to use to not use abstract timing. If the subconscious does not perceive time very well, it tends to really focus on things as right now, or once upon a time, or somewhere up ahead. It doesn't do well with like what does it look like for something to happen in 3 days time. It doesn't always, your subconscious doesn't always process that the way that we would like it to. That's a conscious mind kind of thing. So if you use something like when the next full moon rises, that is something that is external and observable. It's something that's actually happening, instead of an abstract label that we give to something. Does that answer the question?
From Lee S, does that answer your question? Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it does.
Good. All right. Okay. So back to the idea of kind of stacking your sigils. If you're looking at a large goal and you've got a bunch of steps to get up there, you want to look at what's going to improve your chances the largest, and kind of go for that first. Basically take the biggest chunk. What's the easiest thing that you can do that will improve the probability of everything else happening? Again, the example of the home. If you're purchasing a home, you want to get your credit score up first. You want to make sure that your credit is good enough, that and that your income is to the point where you've got a good ratio and you'll be approved for a loan. All of the other things are going to be much more difficult, but that is a thing that you can do through other means and take care of, that will increase the chances of everything else that'll come up. You can also do the sigils so that they impact each other. When you're casting a spell for something like that, you can have several different sigils, each of which support or depend upon the other ones working for their success. And like I said, it'll create like a cascade kind of thing of, once one happens, it increases the odds of the other one happening. And then when that kicks in, then all the other ones go. And that can be very effective, because you're adding that magical momentum to it as well, of once something works, once a spell works, the other spells are going to kick in and be more likely to work. And there's actually a technique that I'm going to touch on to help pull on that. It also deals with that idea that we had talked about the lusting after results, of if you've got an element that you've enchanted for that already happens, then it's already happening, so you're not going to be quite as worried about it, and you're also not going to be worried about whether it's not happening either. and maybe short circuiting that way. It's like, oh crap, this is already starting to kick in. This is great. And then you can go about your and do the work that you're doing on the mundane physical level to help support that, knowing that spell work is still kicking in there. The last little bit that I put on here just says enchant long, and this is a dictum that that Pete Carroll always says is enchant long and divine short. And this has to do with probabilities in working with magic, is that the longer off into the future you're trying to see through divination, the less accurate it's going to be. So if you're doing divination, you want it to be relatively short term. But if you're enchanting for something, the farther ahead into the future you're setting your target for, the more time that has to build up and manifest. So you always want to set a goal for something that that you've got a lot of time to work towards, because then you can take more action on the physical level, and then the probabilities have time to add up with your spell work to reinforce that. So, and this is especially a thing, I'm digressing, but like I do weather magic on occasion, and I won't do anything for a target that's closer than a month, because it doesn't take much effort to do it, especially with sigils, but it needs a long time to build up because it's a chaotic system. You want that to build up and build up and build up, and as you have more time, your probability increases. So let's see. Okay, so now we're on our fish analogies. So Gordon White, I don't know if he actually came up with the term or not, but he will refer to shoals, which is a term for a group of fish. But the idea is that fish will kind of move together, like a flock of birds, and they'll congregate together, and one moves and the others will tend to move with it. So a shoal or shoaling is when you activate several sigils that are interrelated, and maybe some that aren't as related, in one session and launch them all. That will improve the overall probability that they all work. As one happens, it increases the odds that all the others will happen, and then they all interact with each other and improve on the probability of everything else happening. So it also decreases the lust of results and your conscious awareness of what is being cast. And that's a technique that happens because if you've got 5 or 6 sigils that you're casting at once, you're not going to remember which one is for which part. And that actually improves your chances of it happening. I've even read about some sorcerers that will do a whole bunch of sigils up for stuff they want and then file them away and then come back to them in like 3 weeks or so and then cast them after they've already done another batch. And that way they don't even know like which one is which. What do these do? I don't know, but I want this done. Boom. And there you go. And then it just becomes you become more detached from it, which can improve your chance of this being successful. So like I said, every sigil reinforces the other and increases the overall probability of success. Imagine a school of fish. You've got a whole bunch of them swimming. One diverts one way, a couple others around it will go that way, and soon the whole school will turn after it. So it's a good way of getting all of those to connect together and to work together. They also have this fun term called robo-fishing, which is the use of a sigil in a shoal that represents something that has already happened or that you already have. And you're basically, you've got a shellfish in there that instead of just waiting for one to happen and move off, you've already got one that's already done. So that's already going to drag the rest of them with it. It's going to improve the probabilities of all of them happening, because that event, if it's already happened, has a 100% probability. It's already extant. So it decreases your worry that the other ones won't work. It works to improve the probability that all the other ones are going to happen because they're all connected to that thing already being done, and it's already done. If back to the analogy of buying a house, if I've got a job that pays $20 an hour, then I'm going to do a sigil for it that says I have gainful employment that pays $20 an hour gross, and that's already a thing. So boom, it already improves and helps out the probability of all the other ones happening. And let's see, I got a quote from Gordon White on this. He says, lust of results seems less about keeping the objective out of your conscious mind as spare thought, because we now know that moving back and forth between conscious and unconscious happens as part of normal cognition. It seems to me to be more about continuously shifting from the time frame further out. You encode the want rather than the have. And so he's talking about there, and this is a thing that I struggle with, is that that point of consciousness that you use to launch the spell or activate the sigil is all about being in the moment, being right there in the present moment. And the farther you go out, the more you're drawing your consciousness out of that present moment, where it's more likely to help activate that stuff. So I thought that was an interesting take on that. And then that also helps, that RoboFish helps bring everything into the present moment, where certain things have already manifested because you've already done the sigil for it, but it's already there. So it brings the rest of them into that present moment. So so I'm going to get into launching sigils. Do we have any other questions coming up, or are we still good?
I think the only other question was, it says cable magic. I think he meant candle magic. But
Cable magic. What? Where?
Cable? How? I think you're getting into that now. So
Oh.
I think.
Oh, I thought I had. Okay, I thought I had typoed on here.
Oh no,
Okay.
no, in the chat.
Well, I mean, we know what it said, so that's fine. I've reached the point where typos don't bother me, and I used to be the guy that was like, oh my God, those typos, and now it's like people like that annoy me because you know what it says. My fingers are really fat. I fat finger everything. We know what it says. Okay. So these are some of the techniques for activating and launching sigils. So one of the ways that I like to do it is to engrave them on candles, or I will draw the sigil on a piece of paper and fold it up and put it like underneath the candle, especially with tea light candles. I'll pull the tea light candle out of the little tin cup that it's in and put the paper in there and then put it on top. And then as it melts, the wax soaks into the paper. And then when the flame gets down, the whole thing goes up, and it's kind of neat. But there is kind of a tradition of charging sigils by focusing and concentrating on them and then destroying them, burning them. I actually have flash paper that I've purchased that I've used for this, and it's kind of fun too. But for those kinds of things, you want to have, because it's a sudden action with that flash paper. With anything, you're trying to hold that image in your mind, and then you're watching it be destroyed. So that in itself brings about a kind of altered state of consciousness and can activate it. Ritual consecration of the sigil or an object that the sigil is on. So if you have like I referenced modern magic before, and it's got a full like talismanic consecration ritual in it, you could do something like that on it. If very ornate ritual magic is what helps you get into the right mindset to activate that, then by all means use what you know. If I work with Hellenic deities, so perhaps getting into a frenzy, doing an invocation to Hecate and calling in some other spirits will help put me in that mindset so that I can then put my attention on that sigil and achieve that altered state of consciousness enough to launch it. And it only takes an instant of that intense focus, intense meditation and focus on the image. I have launched sigils simply by staring at the image and holding my breath and hyperventilating a little bit, hold my breath, and then just focus on it. And it's almost like you're like that kind of thing. And then as soon as you release, you have that very sudden sensation, like bringing it into your body, and then you just release it, all that tension, and that brings just enough, that split second. And that's what sigil magic really does, is because since you've got that image and you're observing it quickly, you don't have to have that gnosis for an extended period of time. It can be split second. So you can do it very quickly, and that also means that you can activate it very quickly with techniques that aren't really drawn out. There was one thing that I read where a guy was talking about activating a sigil by not peeing, and he held his pee for like a couple hours, and then when he was finally ready, he went up and he pulled the sigil out, whipped it out, and he peed. And that moment of relief, because when you've been holding it all day, like, it hurts. That moment of pain and relief that came at once was enough for him to activate that sigil. And a lot of these techniques also rely on body sensations too. Chaos magic is very embodied practice. So you can use, there are techniques of passive activation. So you can take a sigil and put it like on the corner of your computer monitor. That would work best if you've got more than one. Flat screen TVs don't work as well, but the old CRT televisions, I used to trace sigils in the dust that would get staticked onto the TV screen. And then you've got it not quite in your conscious awareness, but you're seeing it all the time. So if you've got something like that, or even like on your car windshield, like on the rear windshield, if it's dirty, you can draw it on the exterior of the car. You can do it in reverse, and you're seeing it backwards every time you look in the rearview mirror. Any kind of technique like that you can use to have it be just outside of your awareness, but you're still observing it. Gnosis by proxy is a really fun one, where it's not quite the same as the shoal technique, but basically you do a sigil that is designed to bring about something really unusual that will take your attention to something very strange and bizarre in the present moment, and then using that moment as a moment of gnosis to activate another sigil. So you basically like do your sigil that you want and keep it in your pocket, and then like you do a sigil that says like, I'm gonna see a 3 foot tall man with red hair carrying a green balloon, and you do a sigil for that. And then when you're out going about your day a week later, and then you see a short guy with the bright hair carrying a green balloon, and you say, oh my God, that's weird. And then you remember and you pull that sigil out, and then in that shock, you can launch it. I haven't used that too often, but I think I've done it once or twice, and it's been, somewhat effective. I think it depends on how cognizant you are of what's going on around you, and how weird what is happening is. And I kind of notice a lot of weird things anyways, so I don't know that I'd be too shocked by stuff like that. But and of course, we have gnosis through orgasm. So this is kind of the idea through a lot of sex magic, at least in like postmodern contexts. The idea is that the moment of orgasm, your consciousness blanks out even for just an instant, and that's a point of gnosis that you can use to activate a sigil. So if you have a partner and you have their consent, you could put it on their forehead. If you do not have a partner, Phil Hine lovingly referred to this technique as the wankogram. And there are legions of like sad teenage edgelord boy sorcerers out there that furiously jerk off over their sigils. I apologize if that's a bizarre image, but it's an effective technique. It works. And again, back to the television, the old CRT televisions with the static on it. you put that sigil in the static on there, and then you watch an exciting film and get yourself off, boom, that's it, it's done. And you know, it is highly effective because that's a very intense experience. And if you have it right there, when you're in that state of consciousness, it just puts it through, it puts all that energy into it, and there it goes. So, and the real thing is that anything that can alter your consciousness is going to be effective at this. If you're really good at like no mind meditation and just kind of phasing out for a while, and you're gazing at this image while you're doing like 20 minutes of meditation, then do that, you know, and that'll activate it, that can launch it. Let's see. There's also ideas of putting them out in the public and having people be kind of surprised and seeing them, and that can actually help you they can activate it for you. They can launch that. The theory gets a little weirder then, because it's like, if this is speaking to your subconscious, then how come it works the way they do it? Well, fucking magic, I don't know. Chaos magic famously works in practice, but not in theory. It as long as you get the results, who cares? It makes things so much easier to take that attitude. Let's see. So a couple other considerations. I talked a little bit already about, like I was just saying, about putting them out in public. You can use this as a launching technique to make it viral. You can spread them out over a wide area. I've used this for protective measures before. I used to work at a hotel, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to ward a hotel. And so I made a protective sigil, and I drew it on popsicle sticks and then put them in the ground all around the perimeter of the property. If you have a high crime rate or your crime rate is spiking in your neighborhood, you can make a sigil for that effect and put it on, you know, street signs or something, and you know, clandestinely place it all around the neighborhood, and it could help that way. Putting it on flyers and spreading it on a college campus, I've done that a couple times. I actually did, I found a prosperity spell that worked by putting a sigil on pennies and leaving them just in random locations. So there were like, I think it was like 50 cents in pennies that I left all over the KU campus. And then as you leave that out, somebody else takes it, and then they now have gained because of that, and then they spend it. And then it builds up that, and some of that, you know, effort kind of builds up and comes back to you. So that was kind of a neat thing. So there are a lot of ways that you can do that. If you have something that you want to keep permanently, they make really good talismans or wards. You can use them very effectively to build talismans to different entities, or if you're building something that you want to have for a specific purpose, you build that statement of intent, you put it in a sigil, and then you draw that or engrave it on whatever you're using for your talisman, and then whatever appropriate other sigils on there. And then you consecrate that. Wards, I routinely will draw stuff on my walls. I don't have any that are in view right here, and I don't have my black light with me, but I have a black light marker, and I will draw sigils on my walls with the black light marker. And then, you know, if I want to power up, then I'll turn on the black lights, but otherwise it's a thing that's there, but you can't really perceive it too readily. And so that's been very effective for me for certain things. You can also share sigils with friends. If you make a sigil for a certain thing and it's effective, you can be like, hey, I made this sigil for this thing, and you kind of need that thing too. Why don't you use that? So, or you can give them to friends to activate. Hey, I created a sigil. I'm a little concerned that I may have some lesser results. Can you handle that? You swap, and then you each activate them according to your preferred technique, and there you go. So it doesn't have to be something that you do on your own. You can work together with that. You could even develop a shoal and everybody takes a piece and then it all goes around. This would also be really effective if you're doing some kind of group working or group on behalf of, or work on behalf of an organization or something like that. Everybody takes a piece and then all those efforts go together. So sigils can also be much more complex than just a simple statement of intent. I don't really have any examples of this that I can show, but I have made complex sigils using flowcharts and conditional logic. So if you are familiar with how to draw flowcharts and how to do computer algorithms, then you can create a sigil based on that. And basically what you would do is have conditional statements and different sigils for the different components, like you're doing subroutines. And then you would have the larger system that says, you know, if this condition, then this thing, or else this thing. Or you can even have recursive or even replicating things, which is crossing a line into servitors, and I can talk about that at length, but that's really another class, I think, or another presentation. It can get very involved, but you can have those kinds of things, especially for like protective sigils, if you've got that kind of conditional thing. And you know, you have to consider if I'm doing a sigil and it's something that's sticking around, then what do I have to do? Do I have to do anything to maintain it? Do I have to do anything to recharge it? And sigils are usually like one shot. You know, you launch it and it's gone. It's the equivalent of launching an arrow or firing a gun or something like that. It's there and it's done. You do have the ones that you can put off, but most of them are used for enchantments. Meta sigils is when you have several different sigils that you combine into a single image. So when I usually do this, they're usually, like I said, with the flowchart kind of structure, but you can also overlay them. If you do each one in a different color, that would be good. This is where you're really getting into that artistic territory. So you could, in theory, have an entire shoal composed in one single glyph as you overlay and incorporate one sigil and different sigils into it. And I've used that also for if I want certain things to happen, different parts of what I'm looking for. If I do a job spell, I'm going to have certain things I'm looking for in a job. So instead of having a big long statement of intent that says, I want a job that pays this much per however often and has these many hours and does this kind of work and is in this kind of environment, and having this big long sentence that you're going to eliminate all the letters anyways when you reduce it down, I break the tiny components up into individual things of, this is what I want the salary to be. This is what I want the hours to be. This is what I want this to be. And make each of those into a small sigil. And then for the large meta sigil, it'll basically be, I will find an employment opportunity with these conditions, and then they're overlaid onto it. Boom, there it is. So, and then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about servitors. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with what servitors are, but this is basically the point where you construct an intelligent or semi-intelligent entity that basically building a familiar that will do certain things for you. And how sigils come into play in that is that you use the sigils to represent, like I said, with like the subroutine idea, to represent the programming for what its tasks are, what it does. If you have a defensive servitor, you're going to want to include what it's designed to detect, how it's going to respond to that, how it alerts you, if at all, if it retaliates or not. So you have all these behaviors that you can program into it, and then you treat it like a familiar, like something that you've brought forth, and that it will have functions that it completes for you. These can be edited or changed. This is known as the cybernetic model, where basically you're treating it like a computer program. It can get very informational based. And you can reprogram them, you can edit them, you can modify them, and they can make decisions. They're not usually as intelligent as like a spirit or an angel that you would encounter normally. It's not like you're summoning something from the Goetia and it has all of these things that it knows how to do. You've got like a very narrow focus. And in fact, if you go more than, you usually want to have like 3 to 5 main tasks that it can do. And if you do more than that, then they tend to get confused. Or sometimes they can go rogue, but that's a whole other story. But you can use those sigils to encode what conditions they operate under and how they respond to certain things, and even to put in a lifespan on them that they'll turn off at certain points. Or if you're really needing to, you can have them replicate, and their effects can replicate and multiply as well. They can spread out and go places or do different things. Or there's a Phil Hine anecdote where he talks about a friend that had lent some property to somebody and was trying to get that property back, and the person who had it was not forthcoming. So they launched a viral servitor that if the property was returned by a certain point in time, then the servitor would basically shut down. It would dissolve. But if the property was not returned by that time, then it would make weird things happen, and then it would duplicate itself. And apparently after about a month and a half, this person, they heard through a third party that this person had full scale poltergeist activity manifesting in their kitchen before they finally give it back. But you can do all sorts of things like that with the servitors, because they have those specific functions and certain conditions, and they'll keep like a computer program, it'll keep doing it until certain conditions are met or until you grab it and shut it off. Just remember the rule of computer programming is that it does what you tell it to, not necessarily what you want it to. And that's something that's very common in sigils in general, is that the instructions will occur as you encode them, not necessarily for what you're intending it to do behind that. That's why specificity is important. If you do an enchantment for something very specific and you've got something else in mind, it'll do what you enchant for, not what you're hoping for. Phil Hine has another anecdote that I love to tell, where he's got an idea and he did a spell to experience new and unusual forms of pleasure. And in his mind, he was thinking about something really nasty that he wanted to get into, and this sexual fantasy he had. But in practice, what happened is one of his friends came over and said, "Hey, man, I got a beta test copy of this new computer game. You want to check it out for me and see what you think?" And he's like, "Okay." And he's playing this game and he's up at like 2 in the morning. And he's like, "Oh my God, this is the spell." It was new and unusual form of pleasure. And he found it very pleasurable and enjoyable. It wasn't what he was hoping for, but it was what he enchanted for. And that's an important distinction. And that's why in this type of magic, it's very much of the specifics of what you're encoding, and not what intent is or anything like that. You have to be very specific and brief when you're encoding those kinds of things. So kind of powered through all that stuff. Be creative, experiment, use whatever it is that works, and go from there. So that is all I have for my fun little presentation. So what other questions or observations do we have that that anyone would like to bring up?
And feel free to unmute and ask at this point, since we're in a quick question and answer part instead of a presentation.
Okay. Okay, I wrote down, also took some notes here. You were saying earlier how you could burn a sigil or use it in candle magic. Um, now, if you like got your sigil on paper, you could burn that paper in a spell, or use it in a petition spell of some sort. Okay.
The encoding the sigil into the image is usually seen as an important part of it. In theory, you could write out an entire petition and just use that as like a really long sigil and treat it the same way. The petitions tend to be a little different because if you're doing a petition, then you're doing it to somebody. So there's a spirit involved. There's some sort of entity that you're petitioning. So it doesn't have to have quite the same oomph behind it, but you can in theory do it that way. Or if you've got a real simple thing, you can encode that into a sigil and give that up as an offering to like if I were petitioning Hecate for something, I could put that into a sigil and then just give that to her as an offering, burn it up directly to her. So that's something that you do with putting it on a candle. I actually have like engraving tools for waxwork, and I'll engrave the sigil after I've drawn it. I'll engrave it onto the candle, and then I just consecrate the candle, like similar to a talisman. And then you burn the candle, and then it does its thing.
Okay, so because what I've done before is I put like on the candle, I put my initials on it and the amount that I'm trying to attract. And can I add a sigil to that? Like adding it to be one of the other symbols, like an additional symbol?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, candles are great. Like I get the big pillar candles because you can put as much crap on there as you want. You can add sigils, you can have, well, those are nice, but I like the ones that aren't in the glass because you can draw on them. But you can put a sigil on there. You can put planetary glyphs on there. I don't know if I mentioned planetary glyphs too much, but those can be used in sigils too. So you can put all of those things, put your sigil on it, put your planetary glyphs on it, maybe put some deity names or archangels or spirits that you're trying to get involved in it. I mean, you could put all on that, consecrate the whole thing as a talisman, and then boom, there it goes. There's lots of room for that.
Yeah, I've used the symbol of the horn god before. Kuno knows how they get intuitive. Now, when you're talking about being clear with your intent, that it's like if I wanted to say like I want to attract this much money for these reasons, now would you want to just say you just wanted to stick to how much you want to attract to yourself and not get into a bunch of other stuff?
I would, for something like that, because if you're focusing on money is, unless you just want money is always a means to an end. What I would do is focus on what you're wanting to accomplish with the money. If you have a need that you're trying to generate money to satisfy, do the spell to focus on you don't even need an amount. Like I don't want to ask too much about your personal situation because I don't want to get in your business, but like if you have a specific thing like you need to pay off a car, and that's inhibiting you, instead of saying I'm going to get this much money because I need to pay off my car, just do a spell of I will have the opportunity to secure funds to pay off the car, or to resolve that debt, or I will have opportunities to resolve. You want to put it in those terms where you're going after the actual end goal, and then if you wanted to, you could put smaller sigils or goals that could help that, like I will pay off my car, or according to these methods, it would say I own my car outright. I own my car debt free. So then you'd have smaller ones of I will generate financial opportunities, additional financial opportunities, and that will help you pay off the car. I will have insight in what investments will help. I will have side jobs come up. I will generate passive income. Those kinds of things can all work together. And then if you work on it and do the ground level, the physical work to develop those things, then you can have all of those things build up to the end goal, which would be like paying off the car.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. My book finally came out back in October, and it's the writing business is a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be when you write books.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also found out how expensive it is to get your website on Google for them to push it further for you. And I'm trying to build my business because I'm not just pushing the book, but I'm also trying to build my business with doing massage, energy work, psychic readings, things like that. And I'm trying to push all of this through my website.
So for something like that, is the book self-published or is it through a house?
It's through INX Media.
Okay, I'm not familiar with them, but
publishing. Yeah.
But for those for that kind of scenario, you want to focus on any mundane level stuff that you can do to get your work noticed and out there.
Mm-hmm.
Do it as you can. An enchantment for somebody that can help you manage those things to come into your life to assist you. An enchantment for improved networking. Just a basic enchantment. If you've got a book, is the template already set and everything? It's already published and out there. You can't modify it at all.
Oh yeah. You can get it on Amazon now too.
Okay. Because what you may even consider is like putting a sigil for success and sales in the book, like on the back cover or something like that. A spell, you could do a spell to make it more attractive to potential readers, make it more noticeable. All of those things are little goals that you could stack on there that would help the overall thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to take it in terms of small specific things that you can do that can help that end goal of oh, I want to sell books. Well, people have to notice it. I want my book to be noticed by potential readers. I want to be able to network with people that can help me sell my book. I want to encounter new opportunities for financial projects, those kinds of things, for business projects. I want to all of those kinds of things are things that you would enchant for. And each of those, if you do all of those in a shoal together, then they'll start to add up. And then
the layered. You're talking about the layered sigil that are each layer's gonna be in a different color.
I mean, that's one way you can do it.
Yeah.
I like to put them all separate, but you can also put them together into one image if you like.
But you can line them up though.
Mm-hmm.
On the same same piece of paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, on the same piece of paper, you can do them on separate ones. You can do them. I'll usually have several of them, and I'll put them around like a large candle or something, and then I'll do them, like spend some time with them individually, and then all at once, and then do whatever else with them. It's whatever makes sense to you, whatever works. I mean, you could even put them on like you could do like a cube and put one on each side and like sit there and spin it or something. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can do it. Just play with it.
That makes a lot of sense, because sounds like I got multiple goals. I want to set a sigil for each part of it.
And then find a way to have them work together. Like as you get more success with one, it'll help the other.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Sigils and angelic names. Oh boy. I don't have an image for it. I can grab a book. I can show that. Hold on just a second. I'll get a book. Okay, let's see if I can find something that works. This is one that I thought would have it. So like I don't know how well you can see this. Like these kind of images that you see for Goetic demons are types of sigils. A lot of them are done up according to planetary squares. And I wish I had some of the Olympic spirits, because they have they're all based off of the planetary squares. Let's see. So here's a fun one, because let's see, which one is this? This is zodiacal magic. So like this one here is one of the names of God. That is Yod He Vav He. And you can see it's just 4 letters. That will transpose on that tree, the rose cross that I showed earlier. If you find a Yod, a He, a Vav, and a He, and trace them, that's what it looks like. The one next to it is Hanael, which is one of the angels. So this is Hanael, and again, it would be Hanael. So those, if you took those images for the actual angelic names and impose them on that rose cross, that's what it will look like. And if you find the Hebrew letters for those on that rose cross and trace them out, that's what you'll get. These are I'm trying to figure out. I just opened the book and I don't know which. Oh, this is for Capricorn. So those are Hanael for Capricorn. Let's see. This one here is Michael. So that's for the Archangel Michael. And those are all derived using that rose cross glyph or image. So that is an example of that. And if you find any work with angelic evocation or anything like that, you're going to encounter those symbols in there. And they also use them a lot in pop culture. You're going to see those pop up on like the prophecy movies or on Supernatural or whatever. They use those. So you can look a lot of those up. They're pretty readily available. I just had to think about what books I had that I could grab easy. So any other questions or anything anyone wanted to ask about?
Yep. I think that's pretty good. Someone just said thank you. All right. Well, thank you for teaching us about sigils today.
Sure. Like I said, it's relatively easy to do. Start out simple. You just need a pen and a piece of paper. Start out simple, play with it, see what works best for you. What works for you may not work as well for other people, but there's lots of stuff to try, and you can get really weird with it. You can get really crazy with it. So
do you have anything you want to plug? Any of your own stuff you want to plug for us today?
I mean, nothing in particular. I don't really have too much going on. I am a member of the Sorceress Arts Collective, which can be found at our website at kcsorceressarts.com. I think that's what it is. We do have an Instagram and a Patreon and a Facebook page. We have a podcast. Oh, yeah, there it is. We have a podcast. We haven't updated it in a while, but with the COVID and everything, it's been chaotic. So got that going on, and I do have some like bad poetry books available on Amazon.com if you're feeling like self-abusive and you want to read through sad boy stuff. But You are welcome for my time.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much for everyone for coming today, and thank you, Sean, for Patrick for teaching us. And I did put links to the Meetup Patreon and Facebook page and Meetup page in this chat. As well, I did link the Patreon to in both the Meetup event and the Facebook event, so they're both in there too. And if you want to, Patrick, if you want to put anything in those events, you are welcome to do so as well.
There's an article, I probably should have put this up earlier. This is on Gordon White's website before he went like full scale conspiracy theorist. But he has a very comprehensive page on sigil magic and a good guide with lots of links to other sources on there. So that's a really good one if you're interested on continuing this, and he explains a lot of other concepts and everything. So, and he's got his own spin on it. It's a little different than what I want to do. He's a little too close to the law of attraction stuff for my taste, but you know, if it works, it works.
All right, I will post that in both the Meetup and the Facebook events. All right, I'm gonna stop recording now.